The San Jose Sharks drafted Joshua Ravensberger in the first round of this year's draft. What are they actually getting in him?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do, just follow on wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're doing the Joshua Ravensbergen deep dive as the Sharks have a new 6'5" goalie in the pipeline. We're going to kind of dive into the stats, the analytics behind Joshua Ravensberger, and look at what scouts had to say about him, what I have to say after watching some of his games, and then more importantly, what's next for Ravensbergen as we try to kind of figure out his development path. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Joshua Ravensbergen, goalie out of the WHL in Prince George, the Prince George Cougars. First, every time I see the Prince George Cougars, I just think of Thundercats, which some of you kids are way too young for Thundercats. If not, go check out Thundercats. Thundercats was an amazing show when I was a kid. But anyway, so Sharks, again, a bit of a surprising, I would say, definitely at draft night when the Sharks drafted Joshua Ravensbergen, who many consider to be the best goalie in the draft, that they picked him at 30, especially with so many defensemen on the board, right? And we've discussed this and, what maybe the Sharks were thinking, et cetera, et cetera. But what are the Sharks potentially getting with Joshua Ravensbergen? So that's what we're going to dive into today. So let's start by looking first at kind of his numbers and his background and everything like that. So Joshua Ravensbergen, again, 6'5", 192-pound, right-handed catch, just like Askarov. So the Sharks cornering the market on right-handed catching goalies. 18, so he's kind of a bit of an older player in the draft class. He's 18 now and turns 19 in November, which is something to keep in mind, especially when we talk about at the end of the show kind of what's next for him. But 6'5", 192 pounds from northern Vancouver, and a guy who's played the last 2 seasons in the WHL with the Prince George Cougars. Before that, he played with the Vancouver Northwestern Hawks in the BCEHL during that time. About 24 games in the 2021-22 season, but really made his mark in that 23-24 season in his first year in the WHL. That season, he had in 38 games, 246 goals against average with a .907 save percentage and 6 shutouts. Really started that season hot. He was had several shutouts to begin his career, like one of those guys who burst onto the scene. And then in the playoffs for Prince George that year, 12 games of 198 goals against average with a .931 save percentage with 3 shutouts and 9-2-1 during that time. This year, the numbers not as great as Prince George kind of took a bit of a decline. So here's what how Joshua Ravensbergen's numbers look. So 51 games this year, so massive jump in games. 300 goals against, .901 save percentage, 33 wins with no shutouts during that time. Those numbers still respectable in the WHL, right? And you do have to kind of keep those kind of counting stats a little bit with a grain of salt, just because of how different and the discrepancy between teams, et cetera, and the workload. Like, you do have to kind of keep all that stuff in mind. So, looking at the WHL goalies last season, The save percentage, again, not the sexiest number at 901, but that was still like among qualifying goalies, that's still in the top half, probably the top third, to be honest, of goalies there. And the goals against average was, again, kind of in that top third as well among qualifying goalies in the WHL. So it's not like he, was fell off a cliff type of thing here. And you also have to keep in mind Prince George lost some big talent as well. If you look at kind of what they had in the previous season, so like in the 23-24 season, they had two guys who were in the top scoring leaderboards. I'm pulling up. I'm trying to pull it up right now. So the 23-24 season, they had two players in the top, and Zach Funk and Riley Height. Both these guys ranked number 2 and number 3 in scoring in the whole WHL. So their offense was much better that year, right? And that's my defenses for nerds, right? Go score points. It makes your life easier when you're just scoring a bunch of goals and stuff. So, Riley Height, who put up 80 assists that season, and then Zach Funk scored 67 goals that year. So, they lost Zach Funk, and then Riley Height was kind of the guy and just wasn't able to kind of produce the same results. So a little bit of a transition year for them last season, as they just didn't have the same scoring punch this season. So again, that's why you look at some of the context behind, well, why did his numbers drop? The offense fell. Like, you just don't have the same amount of offense that you did the previous year. So looking at kind of elite prospects and how they've done their rating system with him, kind of the elevator pitch, and we'll dive more into it here in a little bit, but big, composed, confident goalie, uses all of his tools effectively, elite puck tracking that is able to come up with big saves. They give him out of a 1 to 9, 9 being like super duper unicorn elite, and 1 being bad. They gave him a 6 in skating, 6 in transitions, 5 in hands, 6 in tracking, 5 in posts, and a 7 in depth. So like tracking, how well can you track the puck? Post, how well is your kind of post play, and then 7 back, depth, right? Your depth in the crease, and how well you can kind of play in those areas. And he's watching him play. His crease depth, he's usually kind of in the right spot. So, also from Elite Prospects draft guide, which again, if you don't get Elite Prospects draft guide, I don't know what to do with you. But anyway, goals saved above expected per 30 is really good. Expected goals faced per 30 is also extremely good. He does a good job in kind of facing a lot of he does face a lot of tough competition, basically. You'd like to see the save percentage a little bit better. I think that's definitely below expectations for him. But he's also really good at dealing with cross slots and one-timers. And it's kind of, they do a nice job of kind of tracking what type of shots it's kind of what's happening before the shot. And that makes up a lot of makes goalies' lives hard, right? Byron Bader, who of course does the hockey prospecting cards, they have Ravensbergen at a 40% chance to make the NHL. Some comps for him: Chris Rieger, Mackenzie Blackwood, kind of noted players of there. I've also seen different kind of comps for him. I've seen Ben Bishop, I've seen Thatcher Demko. Those are good goalies as well. So for Ravensberg, and for all goalies, right, it is a lot of it is the team in front of you makes up a big portion of your save percentage and goals against and all that type of stuff. That does have a massive effect on you. So don't get bogged down by that. That's why you have to kind of watch the games and watch the tape and read what the scouting reports say, because that makes up a bigger portion of what's actually happening, right? Because especially for goalies, where there's so much that you really can't control on a shift to shift basis. So what do scouts and what does the tape say? So we're going to get to that here in just 1 second. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets easier and faster than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals. I know my wife, she was using Game Time to score Backstreet Boy tickets in Vegas. She never got to see Backstreet Boys as a teenage girl. Now getting to live out her dream of going to see one of her favorite bands of all time. And she used Game Time to make it easy. She got to see what the seats look like, so she could see. Yes, I can see my favorite boys who live on a street out back. So take tickets. We're gonna buy tickets. For concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, before we continue, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen of the day. If you haven't yet, even though we're in the off-season mode, down to 3 episodes a week, doesn't mean we're still not pumping out great content. We're going to be talking about Sam Dickinson later this week. Of course, we got some Celebrini stuff coming up, working on some interviews as well. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So what do people who watch hockey for a living think about Joshua Ravensbergen? So let's start with elite prospects, who say by far the crown jewel of the goalie class for this draft. Joshua Ravensbergen is one of the only goalies in this draft that feels like a lock to play NHL games. Posing 6'5" frame, who moves well and has elite play reading. Ravensbergen doesn't always have to look flashy because he's always in the right position. He challenges shooters appropriately, which can lead to situations where he simply engulfs the entire net because of his size. Ravensbergen was a workhorse for Prince George Cougars, and his 901 save percentage is even more impressive when looking at the typical quality he faces on a nightly basis. We'll get to that in 1 second. Ravensbergen does a really nice job catching pucks, not trapping them, and snapping his glove closed to control potential rebounds. He also controls rebound placement well with his blocker, angling shots up and out of play rather frequently. If there's a concern, Ravensbergen's 5-hole, which is reflective of his stance, where his stick hovers above the ice to match his large frame. It's something other large goalies and NHL goalies have adapted to. If shooters can shoot quickly between the feet, there's a hole to aim for. So from elite prospects. Our good friend Tony Ferrari at the Hockey News. So is what he wrote of Ravensbergen when he did his whole goalie thing. Ravensbergen is a massive netminder that NHL teams have fallen in love with. The WHLer fills the net and doesn't leave much room for shooters to find holes. He moves fairly well and has a solid technical base. He checks a lot of boxes that NHL teams want from their goalies, but there are holes in his game and isn't the quickest up and down. Can leave his 5-hole susceptible to a quick shot. Ravensbergen is likely to be a first goalie off the board and could easily be a first rounder. Second goalie off the board, but was a first rounder. Over at Smaht Scouting, here's what Josh Tessler had to say. A full right goalie with intriguing size and flashes of positional discipline. Joshua Ravensbergen shows promise, but remains a work in progress. His glove hand is generally reliable on low and medium danger shots. When squared up, he's capable of controlling rebounds that steer pucks to safe areas, that display decent lateral movement, and can be quick and nimble and butterfly, especially when reacting to high danger puck movement. However, Ravensbergen's overall quickness and tracking consistently raise concerns. He struggles to seal the blocker side, often getting beat high, especially off the rush or on cross-crease plays. His ability to cover the net off the top on the butterfly is inconsistent, and he tends to leave space on the far side with transitioning laterally. On several occasions, he was late reacting to shots through traffic or redirect attempts in front of the net, and goals have stemmed from both rebound control issues and difficulty reading developing plays. There are glimpses of tactical awareness, such as stance adjustments to bait shooters and solid post integration, but his timing and glove blocker deployment need refinement. Ravensbergen range and size give him a foundational toolkit, but improving speed reaction, position under pressure, and puck tracking will likely be the key to his potential. So, and then finally, from our friend Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff, No shortage of teams could use a pick of the highly touted goalie prospect at 6'5". He has incredible size, great athleticism, and a calm demeanor. Package it together, he's an intriguing prospect. There might not be a more athletic goaltender in the class, and his positioning is second to none. I'm also extremely appreciate how calm and collected he is on the ice, and his teammates have described him as being extremely mature off the ice. His numbers aren't fantastic by any means, but he snags wins consistently on a team that would be in a lot more trouble if he didn't have their back. I love that he has to deal with so many high danger chances at a young age, helping set him up for a good future in the NHL. So, again, what I've saw, like, I watched about 3 or 4 games of Ravensbergen, and what he kind of has to deal with. One, definitely has to deal with a lot of broken defensive plays, at least in the games I watched of him. Definitely, it's one-on-one with a forward and the defenseman, and he's having to kind of help with that. So some of the highlights that I watched out of him, though, is his movement, especially from like post to post and lateral movement, is very impressive for, and that's, again, you hear about that athleticism, right? And that is something that the Sharks covet. They want those big athletic goalies, and you see why the Sharks were intrigued with Ravensbergen, and of course, right, drafted him in the first round. That is very impressive how quickly he can get from one place to another. You do see, again, he faces a lot of high danger chances, and for the most part does a good job. It's a little bit calm there. You did see some times where it got a little squirrely for him, and right, not every goal save is going to be perfect and pristine and stuff. Sometimes you just got to keep the puck out of the net. But I would say I did see a couple times where he would push, and then he would almost kind of Martin Jones it, where he's just kind of keeps going, and then all of a sudden you're out of position because you pushed too hard or you slid too much. And that's something that he will need to continue to work at. Remember, he's 18 years old. He's not a finished product. So you're looking for qualities and traits and stuff that you can kind of refine. You did see some issues, especially off the rush, where, and again, those kind of one-on-one situations where you feel like he had pretty good placement or pretty good positioning, and you just kind of wish he'd made it. And like something like tip your hat, right? The kids that are scoring are scorers. Like, it's not like he's just getting beat, but by some schlub here. Like, they I don't want to say they get paid, but their job is to score goals as well. So I would like to see him, like, the puck handling, especially on the net. It seems adequate. Like, it's not like, I don't think it's gonna be like his calling card like Askarov, right? Where Askarov feels like he can do a lot of stuff out there. This one's gonna make your hair turn gray, but two, also like get himself out of, like, you don't see anything kind of like that from him. But I think there's some spots where he can maybe be a little bit more aggressive with a little bit of his puck handling. But overall, like, from watching his play, like, I can easily see why the Sharks wanted to get him in the system, because I do think there's a lot of stuff there to really, really like with Ravensbergen. And there's that foundation of just that athleticism and size. And like, you saw enough with, I think, with the flash of the glove there. And yes, he's going to have to work on stuff. Like, nobody said this kid's going to be ready to jump in the NHL. And even Askarov, right, who is a much more highly touted prospect, it's Askarov is a 2020 guy, and he's finally going to be an full-time NHLer next year. Like, this is a long-term pick for the San Jose Sharks. So knowing what we know, what is kind of the path for Ravensberg, or at least what do I think should be the path for Ravensbergen here? So we're going to get into that here in just 1 second. Ever wish managing money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. The great thing about it too is like if you and your partner, you guys have your own special separate accounts, maybe, and then you have that joint account where you're working towards that goal, whether it's maybe buying a new house, buying a car, or just planning your next adventure. Monarch Money makes it easy to track your own goals and your shared goals as well. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, before we finish up, do of course want to thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On NHL show. Even though it's the off season, we still got you covered 5 days a week. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. What's next for Ravensbergen? And we know Ravensbergen, like he's going to be going back to the WHL to play with Prince George, right? And again, kid who's going to be turning 19 this season. So we know he's going to spend at least one more season in the WHL. And Prince George, like I think they're still going to be kind of around the same type of team that they were this year. So Ravensbergen is expected to get a massive, massive workload again this year, right? And he played 51 games last year. I would not be shocked if he's somewhere around that same type of number again because of how important he is to this team. So what's next after that, right? Because that's where things get intriguing, right? And especially for a kid who is 19, will be 20 the following year in the 26-27 season, he'll be eligible to play in the AHL or the ECHL or whatever. I think for him, like I would be intrigued if he went the college route because with these goalies, right, you want these guys to be playing. Like the only way, like really to get better is just to constantly play games, right, and have those opportunities. And we know he's going to play a ton of games this year with Prince George. I would love to see him play NCAA games for a year or two, right? And go play with a big time program, and maybe the Josh or the Jacob Fowler route, excuse me, of like you step in, and yes, Fowler was younger, right? He stepped in as a true freshman at like the age of 18 or 19 for BC. He spent 2 seasons there. I would love to see Ravensbergen kind of go that, right? Where he's like, we graduate from the WHL facing kind of 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, go play some college kids for a year or two and go play against guys who a little bit older than you, a little bit more structure in the game, right? Not as running gun as the WHL, and just a little bit, it's a step up competition wise, and go do that for a year or two, and then turn pro. And right with the new rules here, where guys are going to have that eligibility and stuff, that's the route I would love to see. So go do that. Go play, 2 years in college. Go play 2 years in the AHL. So that's 5 years basically, right? Before I think we're realistically seeing, right, 1 year in the WHL, 2 in NCAA, and 2 in AHL. Again, that's not a math guy, but I can add those 3 numbers up together. That's 5 years. That's 5 years before I think you're seeing a realistic Ravensbergen making an impact in the NHL. And that puts him around, as he's 18, that's going to be right around his, 23, 24 before he's an NHL player. And look at Askarov, right? Askarov, big athletic goalie, more highly touted as he went much higher in the draft, right? But a guy who is taken this long, and yes, the Sharks could have easily played him more in the NHL last year, but they wanted that kind of last level of seasoning to make sure that when he is ready to play in the NHL, he's ready to play in the NHL. And the hope is, right, Askarov solidifies himself over the next 2 years as the guy, earns himself a nice big contract. And as money, and eventually the hope is as money starts to get a little tighter, when you're paying Celebrini and Smith and Musty and Chernyshov and Misa and Eklund and Askarov and all these guys, right? As you're starting to kind of, the budget gets a little bit tighter, you have a young player like Ravensbergen who is going to be cheap and can kind of be a really good backup for you during those moments, and that way you're not having to, it's a homegrown backup. And then if you do have to make a decision on Askarov, Ravensbergen could potentially be the guy, or Ravensbergen could be a really awesome trade piece down the line, as we just saw what the Preds did with Askarov, right? Getting a first round pick and a first overall a first round prospect from him for Askarov. And do Preds fans probably wish they still had Askarov? Yeah. But that you made a decision when you signed UC Saros to a massive deal, and that's kind of one of the consequences of that decision. So don't I'm not in the rush out and buy your Ravensbergen jersey, because it's going to be a while before we see him, and that's okay. Again, this, as Mike Greer said, we wanted to get the best players, and I think Ravensbergen, I don't expect him to be one of those guys who's playing in the NHL at 2021. I think he is a long-term project, and that's perfectly fine, because again, we kind of have proof of concept with a guy like Askarov, and Askarov has a lot of go look at Askarov's scouting reports, and there's a lot of the same stuff, right? Super athletic, tracks pretty well, and I think Askarov's better tracker, and we've seen that, just his ability to track the puck, and that doesn't mean that Ravensbergen can't get better at that. And I think for Thomas Spears, the Sharks goalie coach, there's a lot to work with here with Ravensbergen. And the more I think about it, and yes, with the short term, me like to have had a guy like Brusevich or Fiddler in the prospect pool. Yeah, but Ravensbergen, long term, Ravensbergen might turn out to be the better pick because of the impact and value that he provides, compared to maybe a fourth or fifth defenseman. While Ravensbergen, again, you're adding legitimate upside here with Ravensbergen and what he can bring to the crease, right? And yes, you have Askarov, but we know, again, we're going to an 84 game schedule very quickly. And goalies, you're seeing now more and more goalies kind of in that 55, even top end goalies in that 55 game crease. That still leaves you basically 30 games that you have to play the other guy. And having two goalies, not the worst thing in the world, right? You would like to have somebody that you feel confident going out there when you're not playing your number one starter, right? And yes, I know guys, Hellebuck, et cetera, those guys play a ton of games, but you see kind of what happens to Hellebuck in the playoffs, right? Just not the same guy. And you do wonder if the wear and tear of the regular season is starting to kind of show with some of those guys. So, and I think with the NHL now, the data is starting to show, I think that 50 to 55 game window is kind of where you want to target to keep guys fresher longer, and keep them in tip top shape. And I think, again, even if you feel like Askarov's a 50 to 55 game guy, that's still another guy you need 30 games for. And I think Ravensbergen can easily eventually fill that role. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back probably tomorrow, to be honest, where we're going to be talking about Sam Dickinson and if he is NHL ready. So we're going to be discussing good old Sam Jose. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.